When I first drove down that old country road and saw the white farmhouse tucked between two massive oak trees, I felt like I'd stepped into a dream I didn't know I had been carrying for years. The house wasn't flashy or new, but it had a soul. The paint peeled in places, the shutters leaned like tired soldiers, and the wraparound porch looked like it had been witness to 100 summer nights filled with laughter. I had lived most of my life in busy neighborhoods where houses pressed against each other like sardines in a can, where every lawn looked the same, and where the hum of traffic never truly let you sleep. This place was different. When I stepped out of my truck that first day to meet the realtor, I smelled lilacs and freshly cut grass, and I heard nothing but birds and the distant croak of frogs by the pond. I felt peace. The realtor, a young guy with an easy smile, handed me the keys after we signed the papers and said, "Congratulations. Just so you know, the neighborhood next to this land is controlled by one of those strict HOAs, but don't worry, you're outside their reach. This land is yours. No one can tell you what to do with it." At the time, I just nodded, not realizing how much those words would matter. Moving in was a simple affair. I didn't have much, just my old pickup, some boxes, furniture that had seen better days, and a heart full of hope. My daughter was grown and married, my son was serving in the military, and for the first time in decades, I could think about myself. My dream was simple: mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons working in the garden, evenings with a good book and the sound of crickets. After years of long shifts and sacrifice, I was finally home. I had barely carried the second box inside when I noticed her. A woman standing at the edge of my driveway, arms folded, lips pressed so tightly together they almost vanished into her face. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared, like she had stumbled onto a crime scene. At first, I thought maybe she was just a curious neighbor. People like to see who's moving in. But when she walked over with a determined stride, I realized this was something else. "You can't live here," she said without so much as a hello. I blinked at her, half expecting her to laugh. "Ma'am, I signed the papers yesterday. Got the keys in my pocket." She narrowed her eyes, her voice sharp and cold. "This property is part of Maple Ridge Estates. That means no trucks in the driveway, no unapproved renovations, no animals except registered pets, and certainly no farm activities. If you think you're going to come in here and lower our community standards, you're mistaken." I shook my head. My realtor told me plain as day, "This property isn't part of your HOA. I own this outright, and I'm not under your rules." Her face flushed red. "That's impossible. All land within these boundaries falls under our authority." She jabbed a finger toward my porch. "That house is going to have to meet code." I set the box down and looked her straight in the eye. "Lady, this house has stood longer than your HOA has existed. And it's mine now. Whatever rules you think you have, they don't apply here." She huffed, muttered something about illegal occupancy, and stormed away. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The first week passed peacefully enough inside my home, though I noticed her lingering at the property line almost daily. She carried a little notebook and scribbled in it while glaring at me as if documenting crimes. When I mowed the lawn, she was there. When I brought in groceries, she was there. When I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, she was there, staring like I had invaded her kingdom. Then the notices started. One morning, I found a bright orange slip taped to my door, demanding I remove my truck from the driveway, or face fines. The letterhead read Maple Ridge Estates, HOA. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. 2 days later, another notice appeared, this one accusing me of unauthorized gardening. I laughed out loud, standing there with dirt on my hands and tomato seedlings in the ground. I carried that notice straight to her pristine mailbox and left it there like returning unwanted mail. That must have been the first battle in her mind, because things escalated quickly. She began taking photos of me every chance she got. If I sat on the porch, I'd see her phone raised like a periscope. Once, I caught her measuring my fence with a tape measure. Another time, she marched up to the edge of my property and yelled that my American flag was too large and not in compliance. I reminded her again that I wasn't in her HOA, but it was like talking to a brick wall. The day she called the police was when I truly understood the kind of person I was dealing with. I was standing the porch railing when two squad cars rolled into my driveway. The officer stepped out, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir," one said, "we got a call about illegal construction happening here." I set down my brush and laughed. "Illegal construction? I'm staining wood." Karen came marching up behind them, arms crossed, smirk plastered on her face. "You see? I told you he was violating codes. This whole setup is illegal." The officers exchanged a look. "Ma'am, this property isn't under the HOA. We can't enforce their rules." Her smirk vanished. "But it should be," she sputtered, her voice rising. The officers politely excused themselves, apologized to me, and drove off. I waved to them and then looked back at her. "You just embarrassed yourself, not me," I said. She stormed off, her heels crunching the gravel like gunshots. After that, she doubled down. I would find piles of HOA violation notices stuffed in my mailbox, all of them threatening fines I didn't owe. Once, she even tried to block my driveway with her car, claiming she had the authority to inspect my property. That time, I had to call the sheriff's office, who gave her a warning to stay off my land. She cried foul, insisting I was breaking laws she couldn't quite name. The deputy shook his head and told me quietly, "We've dealt with her before. She's persistent." It was exhausting at times, but it also taught me something about freedom. When you've lived your whole life following rules, some fair, some not, you don't always realize how valuable it is to stand on your own piece of land, knowing no one else holds the leash. I had earned that. Every double shift, every sleepless night, raising my kids, every dollar saved, it all led me to this farmhouse. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. One summer evening, my son came home on leave. We sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I told him about the trouble with the HOA lady. He listened quietly, then chuckled. "Dad, you finally get your dream place, and someone's trying to ruin it? Figures. But you know what? People like that, people who need to control everyone else, they're miserable. You don't fight misery with anger. You just keep living." He was right. I decided from then on, I wouldn't let her ruin my joy. I planted more flowers, painted the shutters, and built a swing on the porch. I invited friends over for barbecues and filled the farmhouse with laughter. The more she fumed, the more I smiled. Word spread in town about the feud. Other neighbors started dropping by, some quietly admitting they admired me for standing up to the HOA. A retired couple down the road told me they had sold their house in Maple Ridge Estates because of how controlling the board was. "You're lucky you're outside their reach," they said. They hate that. The final showdown came one autumn afternoon. I was raking leaves when a black SUV pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a man in a suit carrying a briefcase, flanked by Karen, who looked smugger than ever. He introduced himself as an attorney representing the HOA. He handed me a stack of papers, claiming the farmhouse had been mistakenly excluded from the HOA when the boundaries were drawn years ago, and that I was therefore obligated to comply with their rules moving forward. I skimmed the documents, then laughed so hard I nearly dropped them. "This land has never been part of your HOA. Nice try. Get off my property." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't talk to us like that. We're going to take everything from you." I handed the papers back to the attorney. "File whatever you want. My deed is ironclad. I did my homework. And if you step foot on my land again without permission, I'll have you charged with trespassing." The attorney gave me a tight smile, clearly knowing they didn't have a case, and motioned for Karen to leave. She refused at first, screaming that this was illegal, until the attorney practically dragged her back to the SUV. That was the last I ever saw of her. The farmhouse grew quieter after that. The stares stopped. The notices stopped. It was as if the HOA had finally realized they couldn't win. And in that silence, I found the peace I had been searching for all along. Looking back now, I realized the farmhouse wasn't just a home. It was a lesson. It taught me that freedom isn't given. It's taken, protected, and cherished. It showed me that some people will always try to control others because they can't control themselves. And it reminded me that happiness comes not from pleasing everyone else, but from living in a way that feels true to your own heart. Some nights, I sit on the porch swing under the stars, listening to the wind rustle through the oaks and I think about the battles I fought just to enjoy this peace. Was it worth it? Every second. Because this farmhouse isn't just wood and nails. It's the symbol of a life earned the hard way, free from the grip of anyone else's rules. And no matter how loud Karen screamed or how many papers she waved, she could never take that away.